to provide presentations because none of my devices seem to hold them well. So I've now linked in from my computer, and I have a different device on my face. That might be why you see me twice. So today I'm going to talk with you guys about COVID-19 disaster and resources for children and families that I've come across. And I'm going to be looking forward to hearing from all of you as well, because I'm sure that you've come across a lot. And at this point in the game, I think we've been forced to kind of identify these pieces and come across them. But just giving you guys a little bit of an idea of where we're going from a trauma-informed perspective, right? We always like to know where we're going. So today I really want to look at COVID-19 kind of as a disaster, implications of PTSD, common effects on children, building resiliency and ensuring safety, and then providing some of the resources that we have used, that we've utilized in telehealth, that you guys have used throughout therapy and interviews. And so hopefully we can share a bunch of resources with one another. I know that a lot of trainings have been going around about that, but it's always good to hear new resources and what other people are doing. So one of the things that I looked at was, so this is Wikipedia's definition of disaster, right? And when you read this definition, it really kind of hits what we're experiencing now, what children and families are experiencing through this pandemic. And the reality is that major disasters, you know, in trauma-informed care, major disasters include pandemics. And so I think as we talk about this pandemic, you know, families don't really identify it as a disaster. And so what I have done is kind of brought that language into some of our sessions, and families are able to kind of conceptualize more of what their children are going through, and we talk about it that way. So really looking at COVID-19 through this lens has been helpful, and it's been helpful as a provider too. So I think as so many things are unknown, and it's going to be unknown what the future looks like or what the new normals are going to look like. I think one of the things that can be helpful is looking at it through the lens of a disaster, because we know some of the things that impact that, some effects on children, and how we can build resiliency from that. And so just talking a little bit about that, how children are exposed. So we know that there's a mixed method that children are being exposed to daily. We see our children going through and our families going through so much right now. They're eyewitnessing it, right? They're experiencing it. They're experiencing the disruption in their routine. They're experiencing the loss of connectivity, connection with their peers, the connection with their teachers, being able to go out and go places. Their routines are disrupted because now they have to keep a certain distance, and there's hypervigilance on them washing their hands and keeping their masks on. So there's all of these ways that kids have been exposed. There's also media exposure. There's tons of media exposure, and that can have a major influence on kids. And I've stopped watching the news a long time ago. Like, I'll read about things that I want to read about, but I've stopped watching the news a long time ago. And I visit my dad frequently, and I went to visit him, and he's watching the news, and it's so loud because he's like having a hard time hearing, and it's so loud and it's so negative. And I told him, I said, just the tone, like it's like a crime, like one of those crime shows, right? Like they're advertising it like that. And it's just so negative, and I can't imagine what some of these kids are hearing or overhearing with some of the news. And I listened for 45 minutes, and then I said to him, I said, there was not one positive thing in any of that they reported. Like there's nothing that made you feel good throughout it at all. Like that's almost depressing within itself. And so just, that's definitely an exposure, as well as vicarious trauma. So we have a lot of parents that are having multiple roles and having high levels of stress and anxiety through this disaster. And a lot of the times, kids are experiencing how their lives are through that, and listening to parents. And even though we try a lot to not say things in front of kids. They're very vigilant. I think my kids hover my door when they know I'm talking to like a friend or something. They just want to like hear what's going on. And so a lot of the times when parents are even trying to find that escape, it's kind of hard given the circumstances that we're under today. And so a lot of the times kids will live that vicarious trauma through other person's experiences as well. So a lot of parents are asking me now, does this mean that my child's going to have PTSD? And a lot of my high anxiety parents are asking me these things. And the reality is that we're not sure, right? We're not sure what kind. Kids are very adaptable though. And from my experience, what I'm seeing is a lot of the times it's more of the parents' fear than the child's, and the children are pretty much adapting. But that's not saying that through this, that people have not come across very traumatic incidents that are going to live with them. And so just being aware of that, but you'll be able to gauge more psychological distress. And that's how we're kind of approaching that and looking towards symptoms when parents do have more of a concern. But influences on some of the reactions and how individuals react to a disaster are previous trauma exposures, right? Like, have they had other trauma exposures? Did they have anything similar that would trigger a trauma response to this? A lot of kids who have had adverse experiences adapted well to this, but the more that it's prolonged, some of their behaviors are starting to surface. And so the adaptability as well, but that fear and that threat to safety and security is now becoming more prominent to them. And so you'll see some reactions to that. Protective factors too. We know that protective factors definitely influence how we respond to situations. Individual protective factors, how individuals can problem solve, what their perspective is, their cognitive levels, their ability to communicate, their social skills. So really, also their ability, one of the big things too that I'm finding is their ability to find those positives, right? Still find those positives to build that hope. And that's really important right now. And that can be through multiple different ways. Family factors. So definitely, I mean, we know that is a protective factor. We know that kids who are stuck in homes that are abusive right now are not going to have, you know, as great resilience as the kids that are in supportive homes. And so family factors are definitely a protective factor, that positive parent-child relationship, harmony within that family system, and a positive and family environment is definitely a protective factor. And community factors can be a protective factor as well. So, you know, a healthy community, if there's violence in the community, that can impact reactions negatively. So just having a positive community factor. A lot of parents that I've worked with at the beginning, they called them pandemic pods. And I don't know if any of you have heard of that, but a lot of the families that I work with, they had some pandemic pods, and they were the families who a lot of their coping strategies were interacting with others and having that socialization. And so they just identified other families who were following the same safety guidelines that they believed in. And then only getting together with one another, but allowing some play dates and some time together. And so they created like these little pandemic pods, and that was a great community protective factor. Great social supports. You know, other community programs are out there, and getting involved. And, you know, I think we live in a very rural state, and so a lot of the times, a lot of the community is family. We have a lot of people who grow up in neighborhoods where their nearest neighbor is their family, and so that can be a positive community factor as well. And so I think that's really important in getting involved. And we have so many programs that are now out there and getting involved, and understand that we live in a rural area. So we have some programs that are really building around that. The school community has really, I mean, the schools have really engaged to provide meals for families and ways to interact. And so I think that that's a great community factor as well. And, some religious affiliations that are willing to come out and transport individuals. And so those are great protective factors as well. Some of the common effects that we're seeing on children are compromised feelings of safety, separation issues. This seems to be really the biggest one. I feel like in the past 2 weeks, maybe that's because the kids were returning back to school, some of them. So in the past couple of weeks, we see some of this separation anxiety with kids going back to school and having fear of the virus, having to leave that safety and security of home. And so we're seeing a lot of that preoccupation with the event, right? So not able to stop thinking about it or talk about it, or want to know about it, know about the cases, right? I have one mom that, she would always talk about the number of cases, and she knew the statistics off by hand, and she really started to identify how that was impacting her child, because now her child was having some anxiety around how many cases. And so she worked really hard to reduce that, and she's doing a great job at that, but she quickly identified how it reduced his anxiety as well. And so that kind of manifests from some of her anxiety. We're seeing disruption in eating and sleeping patterns. Families are having a difficult time getting back to that. A lot of kids working, parents working from home and kids going to school from home. So parents are letting kids stay up longer, and then they're sleeping in a little bit more because they can. And what we've talked about is going back to their typical routine, and they see great changes with them. And so really just even though they were getting the same number of hours of sleep that they needed to, just that change in their routines had a huge impact on their sleeping patterns. So it really helped out. One family, it actually helped their eating patterns because they weren't waking up at enough time for the appropriate breakfast, and such a huge difference on the child's mood when they were able to do that. And so really just kind of looking at some of these pieces, they don't seem really prominent in the spectrum of everything that's going on. And so helping families identify some of these common effects and then finding some resolution to it can be really helpful. Of course, increased irritability and defiance. I've had that up and down throughout this entire piece, especially, one of the biggest triggers that I typically go to and identify, and I mean, naturally it's not always a trigger, but in some families is the transitions back and forth between school early on, when that was happening, when they were going to school and then they stopped going to school. And, you would see an increase in spike in irritability and defiance in kids. And so you could see how their worlds are just completely disrupted. And behaviors can manifest across the board, depending on different developmental stages. And so, you get parents that are reporting everything under the sun. And so just kind of helping them identify like where this could be coming from, and how it could be manifesting in their child and where they're at. And we want to look at building resiliency. And so this is the capacity to rebound. We want to help families to rebound from this. And we know that we can do that depending on the protective factors and what we need to do when we look at it in the scope of a disaster. And so that can be really helpful because we don't know what the next normal is going to bring us. And I can't own that term. I sat in a West Virginia Infant and Toddler Mental Health Association meeting this week, it was the end of last week. And somebody said the next normal, right? And everybody talks about the new normal. And I just love the term, the next normal, right? Because everyone, we have some families that are like, I can't wait till it goes back to the way it was. And the reality is it's never really going to. It's impacted our society so greatly that it's the next normal. It's going to be what that next normal looks like. And kids are gonna need to tell their stories from that. And that's part of building that resiliency. I had a little kid, and I saw a mom she had some high anxiety around COVID. And I mean, she had some really tough situations happen in her family across this experience. And so You know, to hear her daughter ask her, we were in session and her daughter was 7, and asked her what kind of mask she had when she was little. And you know, one of the things she's working on is how to move forward with her children, because she feels like they've lost so much. And so, but they don't see it that way, right? And so we've kind of looked at what she's identifying and what they're identifying. But naturally, when the 7-year-old said that, you know, the mom teared up, and so we moved forward with, you know, is this mom's or is this hers? Because the little girl just wanted to know, like, did she have gems on her mask? Was it a character? And I was like, I didn't have masks when I was little. And so, you know, that was a really big piece for mom. But we talked about maintaining her emotions and processing it through it afterwards with the child out of the room, but maintaining it there so that it didn't become as traumatic for the child, because it wasn't traumatic for her. She was just trying to know and gaining that knowledge and understanding. And we didn't want her to stop communicating these efforts with mom. And so that's one area that we worked on. But building resiliency, so continued interventions that we know is family outreach, providing this education, helping families identify and learn simple techniques to overcome some of this. Social support, early screening to identify when there are prolonged symptoms and possible prolonged psychological distress that could lead to other issues. And so identifying that early. Anxiety reduction techniques across the board. Identify the different spectrums of reactions, right? Like in that family. So mom's reaction is very different than the child's, and there's a spectrum there within that family. And so identifying it when working with the entire family system. Facilitate appropriate coping and grieving strategies. Restore normative age-appropriate behaviors, and kind of looking to prevent mental health outcomes. So we're going to talk about promoting safety. And when you're looking at a disaster, and this so fits, right? So this is a traumatic experience. Safety is important. You, of course, safety first, right? And that's so relevant to this, because we have to ensure that children and society is safe. We have to stay 6 feet. We have to wear the masks. Allowing expression of feelings. And so that family I was talking about, you know, teaching mom to allow the expression of her daughter's feelings without her own feelings kind of intertwining with that. She can express that, but not having such a major influence on her daughter's feelings and perceptions. Following the child's lead, a lot of the times parents will ask me, well, I don't know how much to tell them or what to say. And especially if we've had parents that have overshared or undershared, we talk about following the child's lead. If the child's asking specific questions, you know, respond in an age-appropriate manner. Enabling children to tell their stories of what happened throughout this event. That's going to be huge. And I think even as kids are returning to school, and as I'm talking to teachers, I'm hearing that kids are wanting to tell stories and share things, and that's going to be big, because that's part of a release, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that there's trauma, but it's part of a release. It's a necessary release, and we want them to feel comfortable about that. So I think we're gonna have a lot of that. Ties and reconnecting to people, supports, the community, different rituals and routines that involve interaction. So when we go back to that, there's going to be, you know, hesitation across the board. And so really supporting along that way, and reminding kids or families, parents and families that, you know, their kids need them, and they need them to be present and be there. And this is where I wanted to read, or I can ask, because I know she's on here. I saw her. Carrie, would you be willing to share the information that you sent us?
Yes. Sorry, I was muted and taking notes.
That's okay. So we sent and Mithra sent out an email asking for responses on how people, you know, some people's experiences, what they've come across. And I think that Carrie's response was fabulous. And when you think of these safety things, you know, sometimes we formulate things and structure them so much that we're like, okay, so we need to hit safety and allow expressions. And so I'm going to have her tell her story, because it hits all of these areas in such a wonderful way. So go for it.
Okay, thank you. So I have, I guess, a unique perspective because I am a mom of 3 children, 5, 7, and 9. We're currently in the odd stage of development, the odd ages. And I returned to work this year as a school counselor. And I was a stay-at-home mom for 9 years. So holy smokes, I can't say that this was the best year to return to work, especially in education, but or mental health. So, but here I am, and this is where I'm supposed to be. But I have found that as a mom, keeping connected with other parents is like a means of survival and is absolutely imperative. And as much as our children need social interaction, so do moms in our families. And we actually, we have a little village that it's about 9 couples, and we call, I guess, 9 families. We call ourselves the village. And the girls have a group message, and we send memes to each other. We tell each other what's going on at the schools, or we say, hey, they're giving out food today and they're giving chicken nuggets, go grab it. Or, hey, they're handing out the yucky sandwiches, don't go get today's meal. Or, hey, softball signups are still gonna happen. Make sure you get your kids signed up. And then, you know, the groundhog, or I didn't see my shadow this morning, or I did see my shadow, I'm gonna have 6 more months, 6 more weeks of a hot mess. Like just silly things, but it's absolutely imperative for survival for the moms. And then I thought it was interesting, you said parent pods. I didn't realize that that's what we kind of were nicknaming ourselves, but we called them our quarantine family. We are fortunate enough to have met this couple, my husband and I, that we have so much in common. It's just been great. And we've been developing this friendship, and they also have 3 children, and their dad is a contractor. So he goes into homes, but he's by himself. She's a stay-at-home mom. I have to follow all the regulations on being safe here at the school. And then my husband, it works from home. So we know that we're all practicing safe, you know, and being safe, and our kids are doing the same. So we have play dates, and it is absolutely wonderful. The other night they came over to our house and we had dinner, and we actually had dinner ready, and we didn't get the kids, and we sat there and we started dinner and we ate without them for like 20 minutes. And it was the most fabulous thing. And we were like, we're not going to get them until they come up and say they're hungry and they can smell the food. And it was just funny because the kids needed it so bad, but so did we as parents. So we call them our quarantine family. And then one of the things that I talked about with Mirtha is Kids Messenger. So sometimes I have a lot of families that they're just not safe to get together for play dates, but the kids get on Kids Messenger, and it's a message app through Facebook. But the kids don't have a Facebook account. They just have this messaging system, and it's great. And they can get on there, they can see each other, they can play games, they can take pictures of each other, which the kids love to do that stuff, and change their faces and things like that. So it's just a safe way to do it. But it's just like, my daughter was having a play date on there the other day, and she was doing gymnastics, her friend was doing gymnastics, and then they were both doing their doll's hair. And you know, it's a sign of the times that we're living in, but at the same time, they're connecting with their friends. And then sometimes we just have to like it's been a really yucky winter compared to last year. So we have to just get moving, and we have dance parties. We just turn on Pandora and we turn it up, and all of us dance, and we're silly, and we love it. And we just have dance parties. And we try to be active, like when we have had snow, so the kids are sled riding. It's a little dangerous for my body sometimes, so I don't always sled ride, but I at least get out and I walk and I play in the snow with them. And trying to just, I have to force myself sometimes, because I would rather like watch them from the window with my cup of hot coffee and like just wave, but I know they want me out there, so I force myself to get out. And as a school counselor, kind of bringing it here home, am encouraging my kids to do the same. So I've been doing these virtual recesses. Today is Wednesday. We are completely remote on Wednesdays. We're hybrid. So half of our alphabet of the student body goes Monday, Tuesday. The other half goes Thursday and Friday. And Wednesday is a complete remote day. So today I took second grade and did virtual recess. And we just talk and hang out and we move. And I talked to them about a dance party. And then for kindergarten last week, I pulled up a song. It was called Dance Party. And it has these completely silly adults on there doing all these different dance moves. The kindergartners absolutely loved it. And there's kids laughing and seeing each other on video. They're talking to each other. They got to show me their favorite dance moves and their cool tricks they can do with their bodies. And then today we did friendship. So I said, you know, friendship looks a little bit different right now. Do you have a favorite friend at home? And they got to bring their dogs and cats. We had a rabbit and a hamster as well today. And then we had some stuffed animals too. And we just talked about what it takes to be a good friend and why are the stuffed animals and even the dogs, like, they're loyal. You can count on them. And we talked, you know, brought it home with just being a good friend. Let's see, a couple of other things. Oh, you talked a little bit, one thing, you talked about routine and like how we're off of things. I make my kids get out of pajamas and they have to put on, we call them their day clothes. Some people call them school clothes. They have to put on their school clothes, their day clothes. They can have a pajama day on Saturday or Sunday. And when they have a snack, they can't eat out of the bag. They have to use a container. And those were some new rules that I didn't know I had to implement, but I did because it makes all the difference. And when we came back to school after we had a month where our county was just bad over Christmas and everything, our kids are tired and they're hungry because of they're out of the routine and they had access to the pantry 24/7. So those are some things to try to keep them in routine.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's super helpful. And I think it's definitely something that families are experiencing. You know, kids are eating throughout the day. My sister-in-law was just telling me, she's like, my niece, she's like, she would eat all day long. She needs to get back to school. And so we talked about ways to do that. But yeah, and so many things that you went over hit these safety pieces, right? So it can be really practical, the things that we do and that we teach our families to do as well. And one of them is to just continue to talk about it as a whole. I love the virtual recess. I think that's so great. And I think it's so necessary for kids. They need to have that social, you know, the pro-social interaction, because one of the things that I hear from the kids, well, at the beginning, I think we caught on eventually, but at the beginning was, you know, they get to see all their friends, but they can't talk to them, or they can't like just have fun. And so I think that's great. And you're even hitting some of the social emotional pieces of like, you know, their friends and who are the friends that you're making at home, even though you can't be at school. And I have so many patients that have pigs as pets. I'm so surprised you didn't have any pigs. So yeah, I think that that's great. And I just wanted to share that because I think that you sharing those stories hit these safety keys. And so when people think of safety, you know, you think of a real routine and structured, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, it can be very practical. And so you're looking at the 3 R's of safety too: relationships, routines, and restoration. And that's really what we're trying to do. We want to highlight those protective relationships, those good relationships in their lives. Continue with those routines, like you're saying, get out of bed, you know, get dressed. And I love it when teachers have those rules. Parents are like, this teacher had this rule. And I was like, that's great. She's like, really? I'm like, yes, like, absolutely. Same thing. Like my daughter's 12. I think she could go like all week without bathing, which is kind of gross. But like, you have to bath. You have to get up and brush your teeth and brush your hair and get dressed and get ready, like, period. So routines are really important. And just restoring your body, you know, remembering to eat at those specific times. Like you're saying, kids are hungry because they're eating all day long. They still get lunchtime. They still get breaks. That's when they should be getting a drink, or lunchtime, they should be eating their lunch, right? So really just keeping some of those patterns the same. And like we talked about, keeping some of those sleeping patterns the same. as well. And just a side note too, just remembering that children with special needs, kids who have had special needs, any type of like intellectual disability or high adverse childhood experiences, they process things sometimes different. Sometimes they can process things a little bit slower, and so sometimes they can come out in different areas. Behaviors can rise at odd times, but they do become a little more vulnerable to high stresses like this. And so, sometimes parents don't take that into consideration, and just helping them identify that can be beneficial. Okay, so we've adapted a lot of things to telehealth, and for telehealth, I know that I've used tons of videos and different videos. I'm going to share the resources with you. This is one that I absolutely love, but I'm going to have you guys watch it. Maybe. Uh-oh. Oh yeah, there it goes. I'm going to have you guys watch this. Just kind of relax. It's a little bit of a lengthy video, but that's okay. Just relax and watch it. Take some time. Can you guys hear it?
Amanda, it's a little tough to hear on our end.
Okay, let me see if I can. Uh-oh. Let me see.
You could also try copying that link into the actual web search, and maybe the sound will work from the actual web.
Oh, you know what? Maybe, hold on, I'm gonna.
I have a really good sense
We
when people
still
are really
can't hear it.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I don't know how to get it to, what did you say to do?
So if you go to where it says copy link at the top, you can maybe even stop the screen share and copy it into your Google Chrome or Internet Explorer and play it that way too.
Well, you know what we'll do is, because you'll send out the PowerPoint after.
Yes, yes.
I'm just going to have you guys watch this on your own, but I'm going to encourage you to take some time and just really watch it. This is one of my favorite videos. And it's about My Hero Is You. And one of the great things about this video is, you know what, I'm just going to play it. And if you guys can just watch it, because the music, there's no words. It's just music to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and play it. So what did you guys think? I know I said that it's just music, that we'd play the video, but the music's so uplifting too. You just have to watch the video with the music. It's so much better. But what did you guys think? What were your initial reactions watching it? So much powerful with the music. I didn't give it enough credit. Anybody have any initial reactions? How did you guys see self-care being addressed there? Anybody see anything? So some of the things that we talk about is the self-care of connectedness, right? She's looking at the outside world, and she has this underlying stressor that really isn't even identified from the beginning, that she can't walk. But she's looking at it from the world and sees everybody separated from 6 feet and having masks, and really just feeling that loss of connection. And her mom read her book, and that imagination starts, and she has this connectedness in her imagination, and connecting with friends and what that looks like, and self-care through connectedness, also through meditation, right? Through music and finding color in it. And it's really helpful. And I love this. This is one of the videos that I use in telehealth with kids, especially between the ages of like 5 to 7, or like maybe I haven't done it with any 4-year-olds, but yeah, 5 to 7. But we watch this video, and then they start to process what they thought of it, because there's no words, right? It's their interpretation, and it's a free interpretation. And you can really start to identify as a provider where some of their anxieties are lying. And so you can see what some of their worries are, where their focus goes, how they handle it. You can start to see where some of those protective factors are. And so it really helps you identify, what some of those protective factors are that they're dealing with, and what some of their stresses and anxieties are about it. And so you can really kind of tailor where your treatment goes just from kind of watching this video and interpreting it. It's a really great video. So some of the other resources that we have, whoops, I went too fast. Just to share with you guys, the Neurodevelopmental Center at WVU, they have great downloadable videos. They have downloadable videos on all of these topics. And they're great videos to reference parents, send the links to I've sent the links to parents, and then we've kind of talked about it afterwards. But great downloadable videos. They have great handouts too. So this is one of the handouts, and it has helpful websites, social stories that you can read with kids. Social stories are great to do with telehealth, so you both can kind of be looking at it and review it and talk about it. They have handouts with the links, the websites. So it's definitely a great resource. The CDC and NCTSN also have great resources. The CDC has like this parental resource kit that goes throughout different ages. And so they look at different resources depending on the ages. And the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, they have great fact sheets. They have books. I don't have my book with me, but there was a book, it's called You Weren't There. And I utilized it with one of my patients who didn't understand. They were 4, and they didn't understand why they couldn't see their grandparents, or why their grandparents weren't coming over, and just really struggled with that. And so we processed it through this book and read this book, and it was really helpful for them. It was a great tool. But they don't only have book suggestions, but their books are downloadable and free as well. And so it's a great resource to go over with kids. 0 to 3 also is a great resource. For those of you who've heard me speak, I always talk about 0 to 3 because I love 0 to 3. There's exploring that website. I could just be on it all day, but there's a lot around COVID, abuse and neglect, how to handle it when you come about it, the increase of abuse and neglect right now, the military and veteran caregivers, so parenting from a distance. the difficulties with that right now, and some of the high stresses from COVID, and then for some parents that have to be deployed, what that looks like, and how they can kind of build those relationships now and then from a distance, telehealth and dealing with it. They also have childcare. It's, you know, they cover some childcare issues. And some of the things that they cover within childcare issues is they talk about, you know, parents not feeling safe to go back to childcare, what that looks like, what safe returns look like, how to return, how to help their kids return. And so it's a great resource. Parent-Child Interaction Therapy International. They have tons of great resources. I've utilized them for their, I mean, they have professional resources for providers, and then parent resources, but they also have a great section on anti-racism, great books and suggestions there to utilize with kids. And so they definitely have some great resources. And then this is one of my ultimate favorites. Like I use this with my intellectual disability kids and well, actually all my kids, like that are age appropriate for the Sesame Street. So those of you who have not subscribed to Sesame Street, you totally have to, because they will send you such great resources. And they're great videos for families, for children. This Sesame Street and Communities, it's a little section. And so they hit a lot of different areas. They have difficult times and tough talks section, and they have tons of different topics there. And these are just some of them. And May's Minute is Elmo's mom, and she literally does like a minute about like being a parent and what that's like. It's kind of like a parenting blog, right? And it's really great for parents to have that resource along with children. So then there's other great videos on washing their hands, and there's like rap videos, and I mean, it's just super engaging for kids. And so it's really helpful. They hit tons of social emotional skills and development. And so it's really relevant when using telehealth. And so it's just a great resource. And just reminding everybody about self-care. This is one of the things that we talk about with parents, especially now too, and it's going to be different across the board. Good self-care is awareness, balance, connection, right? Making time for yourself. And a lot of parents right now, they can't make time for themselves. They just don't have the capacity to. Many are working from home, helping teach their kids, and then still run their house at the same time. And that's stressful in itself. And then by the time that their kids are done with school, they don't want to be anywhere near them. They want to take time for themselves, and then they feel guilty. And I have families that are having, you know, family time, tons of family time. And one of our goals is to recharge independently. And so how to separate and have that separation so that you can recharge independently. So different techniques to help parents through that. And you can tailor it depending on the family and using real practical pieces. I have a parenting group that I do, and one of the moms, we went around and made goals that they knew I was going to check back in on. And so just goals to take care of themselves that week. And one of the moms was like, I'm going to put all my jewelry on that I used to wear. She said, because I've not worn jewelry in she said like 11 months. She said, so I'm going to wear jewelry, even if it's just to the living room. And I was like, okay, like that's a great goal. So the next week in group, she had these big, like, dangly earrings in, and she's like, I did it. I wore my jewelry all week. And she's like, and I feel great. And I was like, right? So who says you can't like wear makeup or jewelry to the living room? You can still do that. And so, you know, just helping them to find that balance between, because I mean, the reality is that especially for professionals that are working from home, you know, that sanctuary of home being safe, like a relaxation piece is taken away. And so really helping them find that space. So does anybody have any cool resources that they've used that's been really helpful with children and families that they want to share?
It's a quiet group today. Please.
I know.
I can definitely read off any chats if you guys prefer chatting in anything too, or emailing me too after the fact, even after the session, so I can include it in the recap email.
Any adult resources you want to share that have helped during telehealth and COVID?
We got some great chats in too. Thank you, Rachel. She chatted in the Autism Research Institute and how they have good resources for children. Definitely include that link into the recap email. The Guilford Press. And Carrie, thank you for that as well on YouTube. You can look up Brain Breaks. Has great activities for physical activities. That's great. And thank you, Elizabeth, for chatting that in as well. These are all really great. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, that Brain Breaks, I would definitely want to look into that, because parents are always looking for ways for their kids, especially now in the winter, for their kids to be active, right? So a great way to get active. And one of the things that we've been working on with especially preschool kids, you know, one of the common complaints has been that their kids are having a hard time sitting in front of the screen all day. And that is very difficult for younger kids. And so we talk about ways to activate their brain first thing in the morning, like jumping jacks or running in place. And I have one family that took a corner of their house and they took duct tape and made their corner so that they can activate their brain there in the morning. And we happened to have a session at 8 o'clock one morning, and all I could hear was this constant and I was like, what is that? And she turned the camera around and he was in the corner running in place, and I was like, I love it, he's activating his brain. So getting that energy out has helped them throughout the day. All right, well, if no other questions, one of the things that I just definitely want to, is that we definitely have a rough road ahead of us. I think these are great suggestions and really helpful pieces to build resiliency, because again, we don't know what the next normal is going to look like. And so I think we definitely are going to have a rough road ahead of us with all of the disruptions that we've had with children and families. And so as they adapt and move forward, I think we're definitely looking at an increase in mental health concerns. And, I think that just preparing for that and building as much resiliency as we can now is definitely going to be helpful. But I think all together we can do it. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That was filled with so many great resources in itself, and we truly appreciate you sharing that with everyone. We have about 5 more minutes left of the session. Were there any other thoughts or comments, questions, maybe even some personal stories and examples anyone wanted to share with the group?
I'll just add that that was really an amazing presentation, Amanda, and I really thank Carrie for her comments as well. I think many times those are the things that you put on auto repeat with families to say over and over again. But one of the other things I just sort of add is I find sometimes people need a little bit more biological convincing about why taking the time to plan even fun is really important. And I add to the sort of story, the medical piece, that our bodies weren't really meant to handle change. And when change occurs, stress happens. And so even if our kids are lounging and having fun, if it's unpredictable and unplanned, anytime there's a change, that cortisol surge causes stress. And the best thing we can do to kind of keep that stress biological piece down is just to have planned it, so that our brain doesn't have to think about what time it wakes up or what time it eats. And that if we just have those things on autopilot, the other stuff is easier to handle. And I find while parents hear sometimes that better too for their kids, they don't always hear it for themselves. And so I think sort of making sure that they know their brains work the same way as their kids with that cortisol surge kind of has been another kind of major line I've added to the discussion. But that was really awesome, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Swagger. And yeah, I second what you said too. Thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing all those great experiences with the group and just sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. But all right, guys, thank you so much, Amanda, again, for the great didactic. The only announcement I have is that our next session will be on February 17th. We were going to have a guest speaker, but with some scheduling conflicts, they may not be able to join us. So just keep an eye out for the reminder. We'll still be having our session from 12:30 to 1:30, and the topic and everything will be TBD, but just keep an eye out for that reminder, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.